Hey, Next Economy Now listeners. We're so excited to share with you that we've officially opened registration for our fall cohort of the Next Economy MBA, which begins on September 17th. Our team created this course for listeners like you, the entrepreneurs, artists, community leaders, and other folks on the front lines of the Next Economy movement. Based on our 15 years of experience working with 300 different social enterprises, our 9-month facilitated cohort will provide you with a supportive co-learning community. Together, we'll explore the pitfalls of a business-as-usual economy, explore key business principles from a regenerative and just perspective, all while fostering the community and connection we need to stay resilient, inspired, and motivated in our movement for global change. If this sounds like it might be useful for you or a member of your community, we invite you to join us for one of our upcoming intro sessions or grab a virtual coffee with one of our course facilitators. Learn more at lifteconomy.com/MBA. Plus, our listeners can use the discount code PODCASTMBA to save 10% on tuition. Thanks for listening, and now on to the show.
Welcome to Next Economy Now. The goal of this podcast series is to highlight the leaders who are taking a regenerative, bioregional, equitable, democratic, racially just, and whole systems approach to creating the new economy. I'm Ryan Honeyman, a partner at Lift Economy. My guest today is Jasmine Rashid. Jasmine is a New York-raised, Oakland-based author and practitioner who believes deeply in people power. As a financial activist, writer, and impact investing professional, she successfully supported the Families Belong Together coalition in shifting billions of dollars in big bank financing away from the migrant detention and private prison industry. In her role as Director of Impact for the impact advisory firm Candide Group, she helps investors flow their money to predominantly women and BIPOC-led social justice-focused companies, funds, and vital organizations building the next economy. Jasmine is also a Congressman John Lewis Fellow, a Just Economy Institute alum, Trauma of Money Method certified practitioner, and Zennial, just trying her best to navigate contradictions under capitalism and help build something better. Her first book, The Financial Activist Playbook, 8 Strategies for Everyday People to Reclaim Wealth and Collective Well-Being, releases with Barrett Kohler Publishers on September 10th, 2024. The book aims to empower readers with practical tools for influencing money away from extraction and towards regeneration. Jasmine, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Ryan. Been a long-time listener, first-time guest, so very excited to be in conversation today.
Yay. Yeah, I'm wondering if you could describe, we heard sort of some of the highlights from your background, but maybe your story of what was some of the work you've been doing that sort of led you to this point where you are today? Like, what is a bit about your background?
Yeah, it's always a funny question because I feel like the question that it's like, oh, how'd you get here? What'd you do? And I feel like every time I say it, I'm not sure what's going to come out of my mouth because it is not a linear journey. I'm sure that's the case for many of us, but maybe I'll start by saying that I only recently added that bit into my bio about being a zillennial, which is I was born on the cusp here between Gen Z and millennials. So born in 96, which means as of this date, I'm 28 years old, which some people that is not surprising to. Other folks are a little bit surprised just because I don't always lead with with my age because I, for so long, have wanted people to take me really seriously and wanted people to think I have a lot of experience. What I've been learning more is that I actually do have a lot of experience, just it's more so my lived experience, really just from growing up that has led me to the work that I do today, more so than years in the kind of professional realm. And so bringing it all the way back, I was born and raised on Long Island in New York, grew up really attuned for whatever reason. I think probably a big part of it was I was the only mixed race person I knew. I grew up in an area that was extremely racially and economically segregated. And I had this really interesting privilege and window that many other people didn't have, which was that my dad was a financial professional who had experience working as a stockbroker on Wall Street, as a certified financial planner. And so I had kind of a, in-house a trusted partner to ask all of my silly money questions and, poke and prod at capitalism, and to be able to really just not be afraid to like name the contradictions that I was seeing when it came to our economic system before I had any of the language for it, right? Like just as a kid, really being attuned to that. And so when I did get the opportunity to go to college, I went to Swarthmore College to study economics because I thought, that's how I'm going to be able to really understand and fix some of these systems that have kept my community so segregated by class and race. And very quickly realized that my brain wasn't meant to absorb all the equations at that point in my life, and ended up switching to a special major, which is actually now a like quote unquote real major at Swarthmore and many other colleges, of peace and conflict studies. And so I really got to go deep into social change theory, understanding social movements, and just different tactics used throughout history, especially grassroots tactics, for people to improve their material conditions against kind of oppressive or extractive systems. And so I really got to dive into that, focused on incarceration, focused on apartheid, and many kind of these large looming systems. And then I graduated, and I always kind of seen myself as like a writer and an artist and a creative. And I wasn't sure like kind of how that world fits into this other world of, social change and systems change, which very thankful. I've actually found a really huge community in that space, and there's so many people doing amazing things. But at the time, I didn't really have a full sense of that. But I graduated into a Trump administration summer that was notoriously known for its, the horrific separation of families and detention of migrants, primarily coming from our southern border. And that was the piece in my bio that you lifted up around my real first experience into this world of financial activism was joining very humbly these massive actions to specifically tackle the big banks who were investing and really, investing, profiting from upholding these private prison institutions in which over 70% of migrants were being held. And so my foray into kind of finance and organizing and seeing finance as a tool was the ways in which we would be having very public facing protests at the same time as having kind of behind the scenes conversations about, investor risk and return and shareholders and, thinking about all the different levers that can be pulled on. And yeah, it was really interesting to me to do some of that power mapping and to realize that I didn't have to be an expert in everything finance in order to be able to use it as a tool. And I just needed to connect with people who were the experts and who did have that, and be able to learn from them and realize that when we kind of combine our powers together, we can make a lot of change. And so that private prison campaign or anti-private prison campaign ended up moving over $2 billion out of the private prison industry, which was like, oh, cool. That's a really big, scale. And we didn't end private prisons, by any means. We definitely made a significant impact, so much so that some of us were sued for defamation and material damage caused to the private prison operators because their investors saw that prisons are a risk, a reputational risk, a political risk, and no longer wanted to do business with them. So we were successful in that, and we were rightfully, advocating and spent a lot of time kind of being silenced, if you will, by these operators, but we're ultimately successful. And I realized for myself, I need to be in work where I'm not only fighting against oppressive systems, but I'm also helping build new infrastructure, new investments that are really going to sustain our communities and all, as well as be joyful and really help us fulfill our wildest dreams, not just fight against our worst nightmares. So yeah, I'll stop there.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah, my wife actually studied peace and conflict studies in undergrad. She was going to go to there's a school in Costa Rica that has like a peace and conflict studies master. And then she also does immigration law. So she deals a lot with Trump and the border policies. And, for better or worse, like the Democratic administrations have been pretty rough too.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother topic.
And we could have a whole episode about that too. And also I'd love to meet your wife one day because we'll have a lot to chat about. I'm sure a lot I could learn from her.
Cool. And so tell me about Candide Group. So you joined, give me a little bit of like Candide and then kind of sort of the impetus for writing this book. Tell me that part of your
Sure.
background. Yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't know anything about impact investing really when I was, going through this trying to figure out what my career in the world would be. But during the private prison campaign, it was actually Morgan Simon who really introduced me to the Families Belong Together Coalition. And Morgan Simon is both the author of the book Real Impact, The New Economics of Social Change, which I think came out 2017-ish, so a little bit around that same time, and one of the founding partners of Candide Group. So Candide Group is an impact investing firm based here in Oakland, California, where I live, that invests in companies and funds really across the spectrum that have social impact at their core of their business. So we work with families, foundations, high net worth individuals who are interested in being a part of that change, again, moving away from an extractive economy towards a regenerative economy and getting really creative with the ways in which we do that, primarily using the tools of private equity and loans. And so we also have, in addition to our kind of core advisory business or registered investment advisor, registered with the SEC, we also have two discretionary funds or vehicles in which investors really pool their money. And then we have community advisory boards who are really the experts in the issues that we are trying to tackle, namely closing the racial wealth gap and climate justice, who are the ones who are actually, making decisions on who, why, how is able to receive some of this money to really, again, make material difference in their communities. And so that's been really fulfilling and really eye-opening about what's possible in the world of impact investing beyond just kind of and no shade, but like the ESGs or like the kind of screening out, again, thinking more about that deeper impact of how do we actually build and contribute to what we want to see and what we deserve in this economy. And my role, honestly, I began really, there was four of us at the time that I joined. And so like many in the kind of social justice / startup spaces, a lot of just, wearing all the hats and trying to plug and play as much as possible. And so I did a lot of just kind of, everything from graphic design to scheduling to just understanding
What
the
year was
business.
this?
And this was in probably 2018 to 2019. And so, yeah, I had moved out to Oakland from New York, and pretty quickly, this thing called the pandemic snuck up on us. Suddenly found myself, like many of us, working from home. And, with all of the devastation that came with the pandemic, there was definitely a lot of personal insight and healing work that allowed me to go a little bit deeper into, I think, unlearning a culture of just like absolute grinds, get all the things done. What are what's the goal for the day? How can I check off these boxes? Which I still have plenty of that in my day-to-day schedule, but really began to question like, what is my work to do? And how can I best position myself to do that work, even if I don't feel like I'm quote unquote qualified? Being so close to so much of the work of Candide, again, not having a finance background, but being able to really understand and see so many of the investments we were doing, I began to think about how my experience in, again, really studying social change movements and the kind of theories and all the pieces that come with those frameworks could be applied a little bit more directly to supporting our investment processes as well as supporting the investees we work with. And so I crafted this role of director of impact, which impact investing firms, it is good to have a director of impact, someone who can focus, pretty solely on what even is impact. It can mean a lot of things, which I'm happy to go into as well in this conversation. But essentially, was able to find my role in the work, which today, and I've been here for about 6 years now, is in diligencing the opportunities that come our way from the lens of, who are the people, what's the historical context, who are all the different stakeholders from, owners to leaders to founders, workers, supply chain, beneficiaries, kind of everyone that could be touched by a given company or fund, and seeing the ways in which their expertise, their narratives around impact, that we are the ones who are positioned to support them in deepening that. And so, yeah, it's been definitely a kind of learn as you go journey. I've been really grateful to have the opportunity to learn on the job. And in that time, it's still a very new world to me in many ways. And I found myself really, feeling like there was a gap when it came to the role of everyday people. I want to say my people who aren't necessarily kind of financial experts or kind of deep in the weeds of these processes or showing up every day in a blazer or a suit in a New York office. I did a little bit of that too. Different story. And realized I wanted to create something that was really for people who are just trying their best to navigate the economy, to navigate their individual financial circumstances. And they want to be able to build an economy that, is not just better, but actually just. And so the idea for the book actually started as a blog post in summer of 2020. It was something I just kind of put out on a Sunday after the murder of George Floyd, just like, here's an offering of some ways in which everyday people can not only align their own money, but work to influence all of the money around them in line with the movement for Black lives. So thinking about the ways in which our organization spends their budgets. What are our 401ks doing? What are our banks doing, right? Thinking about all the different potential levers. Hit publish on that and started getting some really beautiful inbound from folks asking, can you do a workshop? Can you help us navigate, our inventory and who we're sourcing from? Can you help us, decide how to find a new banking partner? And as someone who's a little bit of an introvert and also prefers to be kind of writing and a little bit more behind the scenes, I was like, I know, I'll put it all into a book and then people can figure out, like, offer all the menu of opportunities that folks can then take and apply to their own circumstances. So I was very fortunate to begin working on that book. I was a fellow with the Just Economy Institute who really, really nourished that vision and kind of reminded me, like, you are the right person to be doing this work, especially talking to, the book is very much in my own voice. I wrote it for my friends, honestly. And so it's a lot of pop culture references, a lot of just breaking things down in as simple as terms as possible, because that's the types of books that I like to read. And so, yeah, it's a funny, the irony of many authors know this is when you write a book, and I'm sure you know this too, like you got to actually now do the promotion and the putting it out in the world. And so the stage that I'm currently at, leading up to the book tour is really trying to lean into financial activism at every stage of the book tour. So also pointing people to buy from their local bookstores instead of Amazon, right? Thinking about the ways that the book events can be really collaborative, visioning spaces for folks to begin mapping their networks of wealth that can be influenced, being really kind of practical, but also leaning into the role of imagination and possibility and play and joy. And so I've been having a lot of fun with it, and I'm grateful, yeah, to be, again, figuring it out as I go.
And I love your newsletter, like updates are so fun. I could just see your
There'll be one
personality
tomorrow
come
that has my
through.
dogs in it. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. That's another thing that it's just kind of like, I was like, well, we'll see how this goes. Again, really trying to just be as authentic as possible and naming all the messiness that comes with just like being a human being, navigating contradictions under capitalism. Like, I realize that actually resonates with a lot of people. And I feel like it's so often skipped over in our conversations. So I've also really enjoyed the newsletter as a space for me to explore some of these topics and hear from other folks what's useful, helpful, interesting to them. Yeah.
Love it. It's funny. I was just realizing that I mispronounced the like zillennial, because I think there's like what I am is a zennial, which is like in between X and millennial. And so you're like between
Oh,
Z and millennial.
yeah.
But yeah, I think this idea, and maybe you can even speak to, do folks like in the zillennial or Z, do they, and obviously you can't speak for everyone, but do you feel like there's an understanding and alignment with the financial activist mindset already, like sort of inherently, or is it still something that needs like a lot of nurturing from folks to like make those moves?
What I've found is that people are really relieved to have a term like financial activism because it opens the portal for them to be like, oh, this is something that I have been feeling I need to do some work around, but I haven't yet had the invitation, right? Because finance is historically the opposite of what I try to bring into the work around the kind of like deep accessibility, democratization, the lightheartedness, it's very something that is been presented as very black and white and exclusionary, where I try to make it very colorful and welcoming, while acknowledging the deep histories of violence, especially racialized violence, that have been embedded in our financial systems from the, very founding of the United States, dispossession of indigenous lands, to, the trading of human beings through the slave trade. There's a lot of pain that comes with talking about finance. And so I think so many of us are in the kind of Gen Z and Zillennial or Millennial, and really all of us are raised in a culture in which money is something that is so prevalent and constant, but it's also an elephant in the room. It's something that's taboo. You're not supposed to talk about it. Leave it to the experts. And there's a lot of shame that's embedded with that. And I think the reason it resonates specifically with younger demographics is because we are, inheriting a world in which we're just so much more connected. We're so much more attuned. We really crave transparency in everything from, ingredients in our foods to, and again, generalizations. But I think as a generation and a culture, we care about where our clothes come from. We care about, other people around the globe because we can also access them in ways that maybe other generations couldn't by virtue of our internet enabled devices, as well as just having more opportunities to understand and more resources out there. I am one of many, many people who have been working to do some of that culture change and narrative change work. And so other folks have already done amazing work, I think, priming us for this moment. And the place where I want to step in is also tying it to the historical context of we are in a moment of extreme financialization, right? For so many of us, we've known most of our lives just many of us also like growing up as kids seeing, the Take on Wall Street or, Occupy Wall Street or, thinking about ourselves as the 99%. Like a lot of us were kind of, grounded in that. And we are experiencing a realm in which ideas of like private equity and hedge funds aren't just like, they are still kind of like an abstract concept, but they're so much more prevalent and they're so hard to like become disentangled from in ways that I think people are really curious about reclaiming some agency. And so financialization is one piece of it, just the increasing role at this moment in time of financial systems that move wealth away from everyday people towards concentrating in for the ultra wealthy, as well as the great wealth transfer in which the vast majority of money that's held by, boomers is really moving now to younger generations, especially women at rates that have never been precedented before. And I think it's a really interesting time for people as they begin to inherit money or to build wealth for the first time, whether or not they have generational wealth, to have more options around what do we do with this now and how do we want to move this. And so it resonates cross class. It resonates across all genders, races. Yeah. And again, I'm continuously learning like what resonates with people. One of the things I realize has been a really strong kind of entry point is for folks who are maybe trying to pay down their student debt, right? Or medical debt. At the same time, they want to help build a world in which our kids don't have to navigate student debt or medical debt to the same degree. And a lot of people feel like there's this inherent like choice you have to make, like it's us or them. And we also are ready to be like, no, actually, it's all of us. Like when we talk about community wealth building, we're talking about all of us, especially for those of us who come from communities of color and not having to choose between our personal well-being as well as collective well-being.
So maybe could you give folks like a overview of the book and maybe like first, maybe like what is the core message and who is the like intended audience for the book?
So financial activism, just starting with like the term is very much kind of what it seems. It's kind of putting together finance and activism and really for people who want to be able to align money in ways big and small with social movements that are helping build a more just economy, helping build a more sustainable planet, helping build just better lived realities. We don't even have to go like too deep into the different segments of what that looks like, but people crave, just more agency, self-determination, and stability among many other needs of being, self-realized and healthy and joyful. So the book is really tailored for people who find themselves, again, outside the world of finance, who find themselves having questions or shame or trauma around money, but also ready to at least start somewhere in reclaiming their own relationship so that they can better contribute to the work of collective liberation. It's something that I see a lot, as kind of micro examples on like TikTok or Instagram, right? Folks being like, okay, here's like one small, thing you can do today that can help you be a part of these larger movements, whether it's, where you have your bank account or where you buy your clothes from, or you don't buy your clothes from, or just a number of different products, just giving people the options. And no one is perfect. Like the book is really not designed to be this like, here's all the things you have to do, checkbox, checkbox, checkbox. Again, it is that vast menu of offerings that people, wherever they are, can use to some degree, whether it's with their own money, with the money that they have connection to, with the money they will one day have, and doing so in a way where we don't block our blessings, where we don't, kind of feed into the scarcity mindset that kind of the larger culture of capitalism has made so many of us believe, when there is so much abundance and enough for people to go, not enough for to go around to so many of us. And so, yeah, the core of the book is it's very, again, practical, lots of exercises, activities, little fun, moments to give people a chance to practice, to again experiment in like a safe and non-judgmental space. Like obviously it's a book and it can be a pretty insular experience, but also it lends itself to book clubs, discussions, organizational kind of prompts in which people can create their own financial activist plans with one another, with their communities, because the whole kind of point is that like one action is important, but it's like the alchemy of all of those actions coming together is where real change happens, right? All of us can do something, no one can do everything, and we are together greater than the sum of our parts.
Awesome. One of the things you mention is the 8 strategies in the book. And maybe you don't have to describe all 8, but maybe like what are maybe 2 or 3 of the strategies? This gives folks a sense of like what are some of the things that you're really focusing on and that folks could maybe take away.
It's like asking me to choose between my
I
favorite
know.
children. I'm not going to give these financial strategies that much love, but there is a lot of really interesting examples within each of them. And there's people, like human beings, who have done such creative things with each of the strategies that it's like hard to know what will resonate with any one person. But I guess the first strategy, which I kind of call like the grounding strategy, the one that I think feeds into all the other strategies, is actually talking about money, which sometimes people are like, but that doesn't have to do with like money. Yes, it does, because we need to get clear about what we're actually talking about first and come to the realization that we can't continue letting money be something that is taboo, because that is actually used as a weapon to be really harmful in the ways that finance moves in extracting from communities and from the planet. And so one of the strategies I really encourage people to do is think about their own money stories and really put themselves in context, like understand the ways in which their personal wealth or lack thereof, their income, their, wherever they find themselves in and the wealth that's there, like actually naming these things that have for so long been kind of suppressed, and being able to name our money stories in the context of our ancestral stories, in the context of how we grew up and the role that money may have played in shaping our psychology, how it plays a role in our current, daily lives and decisions, and how it plays a role in how we think about the future, right? For so many of us, especially younger folks, like you say the word retirement and we just like cringe because we're like, we don't know if that's a thing, right? But it's like, well, there is so much uncertainty, and what can we do to take some of that agency back into our hands rather than relying on this abstract system to save us? There isn't going to be, a billionaire who comes down and decides like, oh, I'm going to make everything equal now. That wouldn't work. Right? Even if there was, hypothetically. And so talking about money is a really, really core strategy that resonates with folks because it again is about permission, giving people permission to name the things, which opens up so many more possibilities. For example, another strategy is the magic of investing. And so after we go through, kind of the basics of what we mean when we say money, finance, economy, wealth, what these different terms mean, investing is a really interesting one, and obviously one really close to my heart as my day job is in that, in impact investing, because investing has been something that is often seen as so exclusionary. And we've seen with so many of the, for example, campus protests around calls for divestment from weapons, from apartheid, from fossil fuels, like people are beginning to understand that investments have a lot of power. They really, make the economy go around, and giving people entryways to understand investments in many different contexts. So again, their retirement accounts, their, if they do have an investment account, what it's going into, as well as thinking about community investment, line of sight investing. What are the ways in which you can invest, locally in the types of things that are actually impacting you on a daily basis, so that people have the sense of whether it's equity and ownership, or it's lending, and how do we do lending in a way that isn't actually extractive and reinforcing power dynamics? Like investing is a really, I think, scary entry point for a lot of people, and also deeply empowering when people realize like many of them already are investors without even necessarily claiming the title.
Yeah.
And so those are just
Yeah.
two.
Could you talk about like investing? Because most people think, oh, you mean Wall Street. And so maybe talk a
Sure.
little bit about that distinction.
Yeah. So Wall Street is definitely a large part of it in terms of, when we say impact investing in the context of public markets or Wall Street, we're really talking about environmental, social, and governance ESG screens. How do we, again, screen out all the bad stuff, which is, again, your fossil fuels, your private prisons, your things that are directly hurting us. And that isn't necessarily that, inspiring maybe for folks. For some people, it's deeply inspiring. And so I don't want to overgeneralize. But again, I think that it's time that we really broaden the aperture of, impact investing as just kind of this realm of like, how do we do less bad while still making money for, investors in ways that are not actually distributing wealth in ways that would be kind of expected. How do we think about challenging the kind of premises of investment in which investors can, you know, put in like as much, if not more, than they're getting out of it, right? Because the paradigm of investment has for so long been like, I'm going to give you this money. You're going to give me back money. If you don't give me back the money, like that's on you. And ultimately, like as an investor, like I'm taking the risk. And so I want to get the return, right? And in ways that, again, really reinforce some of these power dynamics that have been really unhealthy. And there's always going to be a role of that investment. As anyone who works in investment, we have lots of disclaimers all the time, always involves risk. And it involves reward. It involves this ability to take $1, make it into $2, right? It is a kind of magic and alchemy when people begin, seeing it from that perspective of, how can your money make more money? Like, but not only having it be about the financial returns, but also the many, many ways in which we could define wealth from whether it's the health benefits, the social good, the ways in which people connect with one another, like really expanding again our definition of investing is a core part of reclaiming investing so that it is not just a tool of extraction.
And, I hesitate to ask like about the simple steps people can take because it's like it's like part of white supremacy culture, I feel like, to like want the 5-step action plan. And at the same time, are there things that you recommend, from your experience writing this book that listeners might be able to take and sort of implement in their lives? Like any steps you might recommend for folks?
Yeah. That frame is so interesting because like on one hand, I very much agree the urgency with which, we're often like, okay, well, what's the solution? What's the answer? Often, skips over so many parts of like connection and really understanding. And also I try to be really practical, and I am known as the friend who is going to list things out and like try and have a timeline and like come to a solution by X date. So the way that we balance that
So
is
you're like a
I
book
created
publisher's dream, right? It's like you.
I have been called that once or twice, I'm not gonna lie. So yeah, it's been all parts of my brain have been used in this process. So to answer this question directly, created a 5-step kind of guide, a little roadmap
Hey,
for
there
folks
you
to
go.
figure out, which can, share
Yeah.
links if helpful. But essentially, the 5-step guide is really just kind of something that folks can pull up anytime they're like thinking about like, okay, is this a financial activist opportunity? Is this somewhere where I can make a different decision? And it really starts with first looking at something related to money, right? And questioning, why is this like this? Let's say you're driving through your neighborhood and you see, bail bond place or cash checking. You see these institutions that you're like, why are there so many in this neighborhood, but not that neighborhood, right? So the first step is really just like empowering people to be open to the world around them and question things and do that just first initial gut check of like, the second step of like, how do I feel about this? Right. And like letting ourselves kind of lean into that curiosity is again such like it sounds so simple. It's like such a step of just like question. But again, so much of this has been normalized in our financial systems that it's so much easier just to skip over that step of questioning why something is like this and checking in how we feel about it, like at that personal level. Because again, so many of us are holding money trauma in which we don't necessarily see solutions because we don't necessarily see problems because it's been so normalized. And so questioning, with anything, whether it's again, institutions around you, questioning about your own money, questioning, why you're in debt, like questioning it and then checking in about it. The third step of that is then beginning to allow yourself to map what's possible here. This is just an experiment. This is just like a visioning phase, right? It's nothing actually is being done right now, but just allowing yourself to map out as many creative, opportunities that you can. And it might also mean doing a little research and seeing what already is out there. So for example, let's say, you're really not happy with your bank. You've realized that your bank is taking your money that you worked really hard for and putting it into industries that are destroying the planet. And you're not down with that, right? And so you may begin thinking, okay, what are my options here? I could move my money out of this, but I still need a safe place to store my money. I still want to be earning that interest. I need access to the services. Okay. What are the other institutions that may be more aligned with my values, that may be more aligned with social movements, right? What are the Black-owned institutions or community institutions, right? Just, again, no decisions being made, but just mapping out so that you feel like you have the options in front of you. Then the fourth step is ask yourself, what can I do right now? Just one thing, right? And I think there's often like people get stuck in this sense of like, this is definitely a white supremacist habit of like perfectionism, right? In which it's like, all or nothing. Either you're going to go all in or, and it's going to be like the most impactful thing ever, or we're just going to avoid it completely. And so I'm really encouraging people to ask what I can do right now. So let's say, and I know I'm jumping all over the place with examples, but hopefully this also gives the scope of like the ways in which this kind of framework can be helpful. Let's say you've done the work of questioning why you're struggling to pay your bills. And like there might be many conclusions you come to. You're not being paid fairly. Like you have opportunities to spend differently. Like you could be investing and growing your money. There's so many things that can open up. Just start with one, right? So maybe it's, oh, like I am going to, experiment for a month, not buying this extra thing that actually isn't bringing me joy, isn't, benefiting anyone else, and is probably not good for the economy, environment. I mean, economy in like the traditional sense of the word, but maybe isn't good for people on the planet. And so really, really small steps. And what that does is it helps us build the muscle and build the confidence that we can claim some agency around our money, even if it's a tiny bit amount of money. That preps us to do the much bigger work of asking our communities, what can we do together, right? Again, we have the ability to do these individual steps. How can we coordinate around specific themes so that our efforts actually make a difference? So again, coming back to the example of the campaigns to get big bank financiers to drop their relationships with private prisons and immigrant detention centers, it really was about us all coming to the understanding of like, we don't want our banks that we've trusted with our money to be investing in these private prisons that go against our values. How can we collectively say that we are going to end our relationships, and it doesn't even have to go to the stage if we all just pull our money out, but when we let our collective power be known, then we have, this ability to move millions and billions of dollars. So question why is it like this? Check in how you feel, map what's possible, ask yourself what you can do right now. And finally, the most important piece where financial activism is really rooted is asking, what can we do together?
That's such an important step. And I feel like so much about money feels very individual. Like, what am I doing? How am I voting with my dollars? How am I choosing a bank? Blah, blah, blah. And I really appreciate you thinking about like, how do we move as a community around this?
Yeah.
Because yeah, we are individuals and that's like way less power as an individual versus part of a collective.
Totally. And I think this comes back to like studying really international social change movements, right? And like the cultural aspects of collectivist cultures versus individualistic cultures. And as someone who was born and raised in America, my mom is American, my dad is also American, but was born in Bangladesh, coming from a much more collectivist culture, like being able to also just like see those different paradigms, not that one is necessarily better than the other in any given situation, but the ways in which we can, in a culture that has been individualized, like as like a point of pride, like there is that like, theme of the kind of soul hero that has been perpetuated. That is not the case in other cultures. So we as Americans can learn a lot from the ability of collective power when it comes to everything from, yes, like massive protests and campaigns, but also like mutual aid networks. So much of the strategies in the book and the stories, it's about, as you well know, like the next economy. And it's the next economy because it's not necessarily entirely new economy. It's also borrowing from strategies that have been around for millennia in the ways in which people can care for one another with capital that is sometimes financial, but also much broader than that.
Speaking my language here, Jasmine. So in the last couple questions here, I feel like we could keep going for a long time, and maybe we should just have you back on the show, maybe like 6 months after your book's out, so we can be like, what did you learn? What have you seen?
I'm sure there'll be a lot to share there too, because
Yeah.
I'm learning so much every day.
So the last couple questions here, one is, what do you need right now, and how can the listeners help you grow the next economy?
That's a beautiful question. What do I need right now? I'm actually feeling so unbelievably supported in this moment. And I realized that a large part of that is because I've been pushing myself to ask for help more. Because I set out this goal to launch this book. The book was extremely collaborative in the fact that I've interviewed so many people for it, so many other people's stories that they trusted me to steward. And so I have been really trying to be intentional around, again, in the space of actually putting out the book, not wanting it to be this, thing of like, here's this thing, there's this product that I have and I am now selling to you. Again, it's a resource that I've had to really humble myself around because I think, again, there was the discomfort of like, oh, what marketing is so icky and putting the book out there. It feels like, especially as a woman of color, like there's so many layers to unpack there in terms of things around like personal branding. And I've had to humble myself and realize that also is my ego showing up and being like, no one's thinking about you that much or like really focused on like, and that's not to say people don't love and care about me as an individual outside of this work. I'm loved outside of the quality of the work I do, but just trying to take off some of that self-consciousness, like maybe some people won't like the book, maybe some people will really not like the book, and knowing that that's okay. There's so many other people who really do appreciate and can use this resource. And so I've been able to really, again, connect with my loved ones, with colleagues, with people I admire in this space. I've had a really good excuse to reach out to a lot of amazing people and be like, I have this thing and I think it aligns with the thing that you're working on, right? And lean into those relationships that keep me accountable to keep pushing this book out there in ways. Someone used the metaphor of like books are like seeds, right? You really do have to spread them far and wide for them to, you don't know exactly what's going to come to fruition. But my work is right now to plant all these different seeds so that other folks can nourish and tend to those seeds and bloom, for all the planty metaphors, what makes the most sense in their environment, what makes the most sense for their specific context. So what that means is I need people to keep figuring it out with me, to keep, inviting me and this resource and this book and these stories into their worlds where, I just want to play a small part in helping give them access to the tools, but really reminding them that they are the experts in their own lived reality. So that looks like being really creative around different kind of book event activations. I had a really beautiful call yesterday, which I'm excited to eventually share more about, but going to basically plan an online, international gathering around the book and going through the strategies, but doing so from like the most cozy, comfortable, like non-professional, approach you could possibly take. Like we're talking, telling people to show up in their pajamas or in their sweatshirts, like telling them to bring their favorite food, telling them to call in from their, comfiest couch or their location, having it be a really safe space to talk about things, including reclaiming our like nervous systems when we talk about money and things like that. And so I am welcoming in and needing all of the collaboration, all of the brilliance, and yeah, just super open to connecting. Remind me the second question.
That was, how can people help you grow the next economy? I think you sort of did a pretty good job answering that too.
Yeah. I like that. I like that. What I need is hopefully also helpful towards growing the next economy.
Yeah.
That's kind of my goal in all of this. So I'm glad that aligns.
And then what about, book events or, this episode should be coming out on or very near your book launch. And so is there things people should know about? Where should like website to like learn more about the book? Yeah, anything you want to shout out related to the book?
Yeah, so there are 2 events that I can publicly share at this stage that I'm so excited about. So, first of all, the book can be purchased anywhere. It is available. I point people mostly towards bookshop.org as well as local bookstores. For example, in LA, you have Reparations Club. You have so many different options for buying books, even though, again, our kind of traditional publishing industry will tell you that Amazon is the only place you can buy books. You don't need to buy my book on Amazon. Amazon will be okay. I'll be okay. You can find other places to buy my book. And also, I'm not shaming you if that's your preferred vendor, just letting you know there's other options. So, book is available everywhere. You just type in the Financial Activist Playbook and can support whoever you want to support in that purchase. I thank you either way. The website is jasminerashid.com. So just my first and last name.com. That is where you can also sign up for that newsletter that thank you, Ryan, for mentioning. Hopefully it feels like a little joy and empowerment in your inbox and not just another email. So that is the Reclaiming Wealth and Collective Wellbeing newsletter. And so the launch week starting September 9th kicks off, actually September 10th, with a webinar hosted by the Women's Foundation California. Huge fans of the work that they do for so many different communities. That book will be kind of an in conversation, talking specifically about, the role of financial activism in our current economy. And the first 500 people who register for that will get a free copy of the book sent to them through bookshop.org. So again, really trying to find creative strategies to move the book and get it to people who maybe otherwise wouldn't walk into a bookstore. Who otherwise wouldn't walk into a bookstore and be like, yes, I'm going to the business section, right? So trying to, again, really just get the word out there and get the book into people's hands and hope that that builds some momentum. So that's the first event on the 10th. And then anyone who is local to the Bay Area, we are going to be having a Reclaiming Wealth and Collective Wellbeing party at Kinfolks in Oakland. Kinfolks is a really beautiful Black-owned wine and coffee bar community space. And that is going to be, just a really joyful celebration. I think we're going to do some intentional, kind of mapping. We'll do an offers and needs market. We'll do some kind of, networking so people can understand who else is in the community, everyone from folks in finance to folks in just everyday activists. But that's another event on September 12th that everyone is welcome to and should be a lot of fun.
You said September 12th?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
6 to 9 active folks.
All right. Super excited for you, Jasmine. You bring a lot of joy. You have the joyful presence I think we need in talking about money. So thank you for doing that. Yeah. And I'm really excited. I think this is going to resonate with folks and excited to continue our conversations in the future.
Absolutely. Likewise. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks.
Next Economy Now is a production of Lift Economy. To listen to all of our episodes, go to lifteconomy.com/podcast. That's LIFT economy.com/podcast. You can also sign up for our monthly newsletter at lifteconomy.com/newsletter. Please also rate and review our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.